This is the iQOO 15T and it costs around about £500 here in the UK. This is the Oppo X9 Ultra and it costs around £1,449 here in the UK. And on paper, when you look at it, it's a slam dunk win for the Oppo. But let me update you on a few things. This 15T gets a 200 megapixel main camera, 8000 mAh battery, and a flagship level CPU. This X9 Ultra, its main lens is again 200 megapixel, has a 7050 mAh battery, and has a flagship level CPU. So on paper, these are not much difference between the two, and they've been with us for a few months now. But why would you pay 3 extra cost of this 15T for this X9 Ultra? Well, we're about to find out and tell you why and whether if it's worth it or not. The main difference between both of these is of course in its cameras, because the X9 Ultra is the benchmark for smartphone photography and videography globally anywhere. But the two main lenses on the 15T are a 200 megapixel main lens and a 50 megapixel ultra wide, which is the same too on the X9 Ultra in terms of its specification, and that's where we're going to be making the main comparisons between these two phones when it comes to its lenses. Now, that main lens on both perform very well, but the larger sensor on the X9 Ultra allows you to achieve greater shallow depth of field, and the overall image processing and the quality is far superior. But the 15T is still producing really nice images, and there is an extra layer of added brightness here and contrast, which a lot of people will love. And even at 2x, both deliver lossless zoom, which is genuinely great. The main lenses, of course, in terms of video, will produce 8K video up to 30 FPS, but 4K 30 on both looks really good. But much like the main lens and the images, the iQOO does add an extra layer of brightness and contrast, which does dial up quite a bit, while the X9 Ultra does deliver better overall real life quality. The ultra wide again is in favor of the X9 Ultra. You get really nice wide shots here with no real softness in the corners, which sadly does impact the 15T. Not a bad sensor on the 15T, just smaller, as not able to let in as much light as the X9 Ultra, and is slightly narrow as well, and therefore not as detailed. Again, I would say the images out of the 15T do look good at this price point. One thing to note here as well with the X9 Ultra in particular is there are two additional lenses here, including a color sensor spectral lens as well, which is a 200 megapixel periscope telephoto and a 10x telephoto. But we haven't factored these into the camera comparison between the two, because that would make it very lopsided and very unfair. On the whole though, the X9 Ultra is the better overall camera across those two main lenses, but the 15T does hold its own in its own right. On the performance front, it's super interesting because the 15T is powered by a custom Dimensity 9500 Monster Edition, whilst the X9 Ultra gets a Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5. And there is one significant difference here. If you run these both through the loop scores on 3D Mark, you will see that the 15T actually garners a greater loop score and better overall stability. Both though do throttle quite a lot under heavy load, which is to be expected. And if you run these both through Nano Review and check what their respective processors perform, if you refer to just Antutu benchmarks here, it's the 8 Elite Gen 5 of the X9 Ultra that actually performs better than a Dimensity 9500. However, what I would say, if you're a gamer and you wanted to game on both of these phones, then what you will see is both of them actually perform almost exactly the same. Both will run high graphics, both will achieve over 120 FPS on games like Call of Duty Mobile, and both will run really, really well. However, the custom gaming chipset inside the iQOO and the additional software options, things like being able to customize menus and your input, etc., and the general game controls are better on the iQOO 15 versus the X9 Ultra, which is more of a camera-centric phone than is a performance gaming phone. But sound output wise, we want you to comment below your thoughts. Here's a quick gaming example of the iQOO 15T and the X9 Ultra. Comment below what you think sounds better.
Reloading. Get down, sniper down. Target sight. We've taken the lead.
Then there's the battery comparison. As we mentioned at the start of this video, the iQOO 15T gets you an 8,000 mAh battery and the X9 Ultra is 7,050 mAh battery. And there is a significant difference. If you run this through 3D Mark's Lifetime Extreme test, the scores at the bottom are super interesting. In terms of battery consumption on that test, the 15T is only consuming 5%, while the X9 Ultra is 8%, which more than likely is due to the size of the battery difference. But what I would say, when we took this out into that comparison, taking between 30 to 50-ish shots, rough estimate, the X9 Ultra used a couple of percent in terms of its battery, including video, while the 15T used 0%. So again, another chink in the armor for the iQOO 15T when it comes to battery performance. But when you're under heavy load and you're gaming under long periods of time, again, it's the 15T that will use less batteries than the X9 Ultra. Things like standby time as well, there is a difference. The 15T, again, is better optimized in terms of battery performance versus the X9 Ultra. So overall, the battery performance as a whole, including the CPU, is actually better on the 15T versus the X9 Ultra. Then the significance between the two in terms of its displays is super interesting. Both have 6.8-inch 144Hz AMOLED displays. The 15T's display actually is brighter at 4500 nits as well, but you're not actually going to see that unless you're in bright daylight conditions outside, and even then you really got to look for it. But what I would say is when we ran both on a 1-hour YouTube video, 4K resolution, max brightness, the 15T used 0% in terms of its battery, whilst the X9 Ultra used around about 10% in the exact same conditions, which is an insane difference between the two, and just goes to show just how well optimized the 15T is. Other thing to note here on battery is both of these have 100 watts of wired charging. The 15T actually gets you a plug in the box. The X9 Ultra doesn't, but reverse charging of both is also an option. Wireless charging exists on the X9 Ultra at 50 watts, I believe it is, whilst on the 15T, there is no wireless charging option. Now, in terms of build, let's talk about that. They both are built in a very, very similar way. The 15T, for example, gets you a really pleasing, most commonly accepted look because you get flat rails all over, a square camera island, and then generally it's going to fit right in with your normal day-to-day smartphone, your iPhone, your Samsung, your Google. It will look and sit alongside them and no one's really going to notice that it stands out that much. If you refer to the back of the X9 Ultra though, you get a massive, huge camera design island here for those sensors, and of course the Hasselblad inspired sort of dual layer here in terms of its cutout. So one is far more acceptable than the other in terms of its design profile. In terms of weight, both obviously quite big phones, 6.82 inches on both in terms of the displays and size, but the 15T is lighter at 215 grams versus the 235 grams on the X9 Ultra. However, picking up both, you're not going to really notice a difference. They are pretty big phones in hand. Other thing in terms of build though is IP rating. Both are IP69 dust and water resistant as well, which means any contact with water, be it boiling hot or under pressure, they won't be impacted all that much. So using these phones when wet actually will make no difference at all, and they work pretty great even out in the rain. On the whole, and to sum it up quite simply, is the X9 Ultra is definitely the overall better phone in terms of its totality because cameras are so overpowering versus the 15T, and you do get a slightly more premium build here. We didn't touch on OS because the 15T is running Chinese ROM, but one thing I do want to mention on the 15T is if you're not in the market for an ultra phone, but you want a phone that performs really, really well, like a flagship level, and gets you really good cameras, stunning display, and a solid overall build, then for £500, you're not going to beat the iQOO 15T. If you're very camera centric, and that is a must for you, then something like the X9 Ultra is going to be your go-to phone if you're willing to trump up the cost. But let us know in the comment section below your thoughts. If you're not buying an ultra phone, would you consider something like the iQOO 15T, even if you have to import it in and it does have some limitations in Chinese language? Let us know below. Thank you so much for watching. Until the next one, as always, we out.